It was a perfect Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining, the grill was sizzling, and laughter echoed across the backyard as Alex and his friends enjoyed a well-deserved pool party. After weeks of grueling work, Alex had been looking forward to this moment, relaxing with his closest friends, good food, and great music. His backyard was the ideal spot, spacious, clean, and featuring a legally installed pool that he had every right to use. But there was one problem with Heather. Heather was the self-proclaimed enforcer of the neighborhood. As a member of the Homeowners Association (HOA) board, she believed it was her duty to police everyone's actions, even those who weren't part of the HOA. Alex's house had been grandfathered out of the association long before he bought it, meaning Heather had no jurisdiction over him. And that drove her crazy. For months, Heather had made it her mission to make Alex's life difficult. It started with petty emails disguised as friendly neighborhood reminders. Then came the passive-aggressive complaints about things that weren't even violations. His trash cans were too visible, his lawn was a half-inch too high, and his car parked in his own driveway was apparently an eyesore. Alex had ignored her antics for the most part. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he also wasn't about to let some overbearing control freak dictate how he lived in his own home. So, when he planned a small Saturday barbecue and pool party with some friends, he made sure everything was in compliance. Noise levels were kept reasonable, the guest list was limited to close friends and neighbors who didn't mind, and his pool was legally installed. The afternoon started off perfectly. The grill was sizzling, the sun was shining, and laughter echoed across the yard. Alex leaned back in his chair, drink in hand, enjoying the easygoing atmosphere. Then he noticed her. Heather stood at her window, peering through the blinds like some kind of suburban spy. Her lips were pursed so tightly it looked like she was sucking on a lemon. She stood there for a full 10 minutes, watching, judging. Then, with a dramatic huff, she disappeared from view. Alex smirked. He knew exactly what was coming next. Sure enough, 3 minutes later, Heather was stomping up his driveway. She wore her usual uniform of superiority, a stiff cardigan, mom jeans, and a clipboard that Alex was 90% sure she carried around just to look official. She didn't even knock. She just barged through the side gate and marched up to Alex, hands on her hips. "This," she declared, gesturing at the party as if it were a crime scene, "is unacceptable." Alex sighed, already exhausted. "Heather, I'm not part of the HOA. You know that." "This isn't about the HOA," she snapped, her voice rising. "It's about community standards. We have rules here. You can't just throw a reckless, disruptive," and she sniffed dramatically, "probably illegal gathering in the middle of the day." Alex raised an eyebrow. "It's a small pool party, not a nightclub." Heather ignored him, flipping through the papers on her clipboard. "I have a list of neighborhood policies that clearly state." "Those don't apply to me," Alex interrupted again. "Not in the HOA." Heather's eye twitched. "That pool is not HOA approved." Alex smirked. "Good thing I didn't need HOA approval. I got a permit from the city." For a moment, Heather just stood there, blinking like a malfunctioning robot. Alex could practically hear her brain buffering as she tried to process the fact that she had no power here. Then, just like always, she changed tactics. "If you don't shut this party down, I will call the authorities." Alex exhaled slowly. He could feel the eyes of his friends on him, waiting to see how he would handle this. He glanced at Heather, who stood there with her arms crossed, fully expecting him to cave. He grinned. "Go ahead." Heather's mouth fell open. She clearly wasn't expecting that response. What? "Go ahead and call them," Alex repeated, leaning back in his chair. "I'm sure the cops will love to hear about how a legal gathering is ruining your Saturday." For a second, she hesitated. But then, with a smug smirk, she pulled out her phone and dialed. Alex couldn't believe she was actually going through with it. He watched as she stepped back, speaking loudly and dramatically into the phone as if she were reporting a felony in progress. "Hello. Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance. There's a huge unauthorized party happening right now. Excessive noise, possible violations of zoning laws," she threw in a gasp for effect. "I don't think the pool is even legal." Alex just shook his head. He turned to his friends, who were now watching in amusement. "She just called the cops on a pool party," one of them whispered, barely suppressing laughter. Heather ended the call and gave Alex a victorious smirk. "The police will be here shortly. Hope you're ready for some fines." Alex just shrugged. Sure, Heather. Let's see how that works out for you. 15 minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. Heather practically vibrated with excitement. Oh, this is going to be good, she whispered, barely containing her glee. Then the squad car rolled up to the curb. Two officers stepped out, their expressions neutral as they surveyed the scene. One of them, Officer Daniels, approached Alex. We got a call about a disturbance. Before Alex could speak, Heather leaped forward. Yes, officer. Thank goodness you're here. This man is hosting an illegal pool party. It's a nuisance to the entire neighborhood, and his pool, she jabbed a finger toward it, isn't even legal. The officer frowned. He turned to Alex. Sir, do you have paperwork for the pool? Without missing a beat, Alex pulled out a neatly organized folder. Absolutely, he said, handing it over. Permit from the city, zoning approvals, all in order. Also, I have security camera footage if you'd like to check noise levels. And as for a neighborhood-wide nuisance, I think you'll find that most of my neighbors were invited. The officer looked through the documents, then slowly turned back to Heather. Do you realize that filing a false police report is a crime? Heather's smirk vanished. I was just, she stammered, her face turning red. The officer sighed. If this is just a civil dispute, this is not a police matter. You could be facing a fine for wasting emergency services time. Alex folded his arms. And while we're on the subject of breaking the law, I'd love to discuss something else, like trespassing. Heather's face paled. She hadn't expected this to backfire. And Alex? He was just getting started. The fake HOA violation. The next morning, Alex woke up to find a formal HOA violation notice in his mailbox. He held up the letter and read it aloud to his friend Mike, who had stayed over after the party. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you are in violation of HOA community standards. Your recent unauthorized gathering has caused multiple complaints regarding noise, unsanctioned pool usage, and general disruption. You are hereby ordered to cease all non-approved activities immediately or face fines and legal action. Alex snorted. They really think this is going to scare me. Mike shook his head. Dude, you're not even in the HOA. They can't fine you. Alex grinned. Exactly. But it wasn't just about the letter. The real issue was Heather. This wasn't a legitimate HOA decision. It was a personal attack. Heather had pressured the HOA board into sending him this letter, despite the fact that they had no legal authority over his property. Alex wasn't going to let it slide. Uncovering Heather's lies. Alex spent the next 2 hours researching HOA bylaws, city zoning laws, and property ownership records. He wanted proof, solid, indisputable evidence that Heather and the HOA were crossing a line. And that's when he found it, a legal loophole. Alex wasn't just exempt from the HOA due to a technicality in the property records. The HOA had zero jurisdiction over his lot. Better yet, Heather was misusing HOA funds. As he dug deeper, Alex found HOA expense records that didn't add up, mysterious charges, unauthorized fines, even Heather using HOA money to upgrade her own front yard. It was the golden ticket. Heather had been so busy trying to take Alex down that she hadn't realized she was leaving a trail of her own violations. Alex knew exactly what to do next. Setting the trap. Alex drafted a formal response to the HOA, citing all the legal exemptions proving they had no authority over him. He attached copies of the permits for his pool, noise regulations, and a list of his neighbors who had no complaints. Then he did something bold. He announced another pool party. This time, he made sure Heather knew about it. She took the bait immediately. Less than an hour after the announcement, Heather sent another email blast to the HOA board, demanding they take serious action against Alex. But Alex had one more trick up his sleeve, Heather's biggest mistake yet. Heather's obsession. Heather wasn't just sending emails, she was snooping. Alex's security cameras caught her on tape trespassing in his backyard at midnight. She was digging through his trash, taking photos of his pool equipment, even messing with his property. Alex had her, and now he was going to end this once and for all. The fake HOA meeting. The next morning, Alex found another letter taped to his door. Urgent HOA meeting regarding ongoing violations. Attendance required. Alex rolled his eyes. Dude, Mike muttered, looking over his shoulder. She's still at it. Alex chuckled. This is getting pathetic. The letter demanded that Alex attend a special emergency HOA meeting to discuss the issues surrounding his property. The problem? Alex wasn't part of the HOA, and yet Heather had scheduled a meeting specifically for him. That alone was shady. So, Alex decided to go, not because he cared about the HOA's opinion, but because he wanted to see Heather crash and burn. The emergency HOA meeting. That evening, Alex arrived at the HOA clubhouse. Inside, a small group of board members sat at a long table, while Heather sat at the head, looking smug. Alex immediately noticed something odd. Most of the board members looked uncomfortable. They weren't fully on board with Heather's nonsense. They were just tolerating her. Heather cleared her throat dramatically. We are gathered here today to discuss the disturbances that have been caused by Alex's illegal pool and unauthorized gatherings. Alex smirked. You mean my legal pool and completely lawful parties? Heather's eye twitched. That's not the point. We have received multiple complaints. The HOA has decided that action must be taken. Alex leaned back in his chair. Really? Who complained? Silence. Heather shifted uncomfortably. The complaints are anonymous. Alex laughed. Right. Let me guess. You're the only one who complains. One of the HOA board members, Mrs. Lanning, finally spoke up. Actually, we haven't received any official complaints, except from Heather. Heather froze. That's not true. I have documents. Alex cut her off. Great. Show us. Heather rummaged through her fake HOA violation papers, but the more she flipped through them, the more obvious it became. She had nothing. Alex smiled. Since we're talking about violations, I actually brought something too. He pulled out his phone, opened the security footage, and cast it onto the large screen behind them. The video played, and there it was, crystal clear footage of Heather trespassing in Alex's backyard. Gasps filled the room. Heather turned pale. Alex let the footage play for a full minute before pausing and looking her dead in the eye. Heather, he said, his voice deadly calm. Would you like to explain why you were trespassing on my property at midnight? Heather's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I was just. Alex continued. Oh, and why you were tampering with my pool equipment. More gasps. The HOA board whispered amongst themselves. Heather's plan had completely backfired. Alex turned to the board. Trespassing is a crime. I'd be happy to press charges. Heather jumped up. You wouldn't dare. Alex grinned. Oh, I absolutely would. Heather's meltdown. Heather lost it. She slammed her hands on the table. This is ridiculous. You all just let him get away with everything. Mrs. Lanning folded her arms. Heather, you lied about HOA complaints and broke into someone's property. This isn't about Alex anymore. It's about you. One of the other board members, Mr. Thompson, sighed. Honestly, Heather, we've put up with your antics for too long. You constantly harass homeowners, issue fake violations, and now we see you're breaking the law. Heather turned bright red. You can't do this to me. I'm the one keeping this neighborhood in order. Alex smirked. Not anymore. You're not. Mr. Thompson exchanged glances with the rest of the board. Heather, effective immediately, you are being removed from the HOA board. Heather staggered back. What? Mrs. Lanning nodded. We'll also be conducting an audit on how HOA funds were used over the last 2 years. Heather looked horrified. And Alex? He was enjoying every second. The ultimate payback. As soon as the meeting ended, Alex pulled out his phone. Heather's eyes widened. Wait, what are you doing? Alex's voice was casual. Oh, nothing major. Just reporting a trespasser. Heather gasped. You can't be serious. Alex grinned. Dead serious. He dialed. Within minutes, the same officers from before arrived. Heather's whole body shook as they played back the footage. The officers turned to Alex. Do you want to press charges? Heather looked at him, desperate. Alex thought about it for a second, then smirked. No, I don't think I will. Heather let out a relieved breath. Then Alex added, Yet. Heather nearly fainted. The fallout. Heather was removed from the HOA board, and a full investigation into her misuse of funds was launched. She tried one last move, sending a fake legal threat to Alex. But when Alex looked up the so-called lawyer, it turned out to be a template she copied from the internet. It was over. And Alex? He threw another pool party. This time, the whole neighborhood celebrated the downfall of HOA Heather. Heather, now completely humiliated, put her house up for sale. But there was one problem. No one wanted to live in a neighborhood where Heather had made enemies with everyone. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. The final bait. Alex had one last move to make sure Heather's reign of terror was over for good. He waited. He let her think she had won. And then he announced another pool party. This time, he made sure Heather knew about it. Flyers went up, social media posts were made, and invites were sent out to the entire neighborhood. And Heather? She took the bait instantly. Within hours, she was already ranting in the HOA group chat, sending furious emails, and even going door to door trying to rally people against Alex. But here's the thing, nobody cared anymore. The HOA board had turned against her, the neighbors were sick of her nonsense, and Alex? Alex was waiting, because he knew Heather was going to break the law again. And this time, she wouldn't be getting off so easily. Heather's biggest mistake. The night before Alex's party, Heather couldn't take it anymore. She had tried everything. Calling the cops failed, fake violations failed, HOA power moves backfired. She had one last desperate option, sabotage. Under the cover of darkness, Heather snuck back into Alex's backyard. But what she didn't know was that Alex had installed extra security cameras. This time, he had multiple angles, night vision, and audio recording. And when Heather crawled through a gap in the fence, her every move was being recorded. She cut the pool pump wires. She tampered with the filter. She poured something suspicious into the water. And then she tried to sneak back out. But Alex? He was waiting. The perfect payback. The moment Heather turned to leave, Alex flipped on his backyard floodlights. Heather froze like a deer in headlights. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Alex smirked. Going somewhere, Heather? Heather spun around. I was just. Alex pulled out his phone and hit play. The security footage showed everything. Heather trespassing, Heather damaging property, Heather committing a literal crime. Her face drained of color. You can't use that against me, she stammered. Alex raised an eyebrow. Oh, Heather, you just committed vandalism and trespassing. Heather tried to backpedal. I was just checking to make sure your pool was safe. Alex laughed. By cutting my pump wires and dumping chemicals into my pool. Heather gasped. That's a lie. Alex smiled wider. No, Heather. That's evidence. And then he dialed the police. Heather's eyes went wide. No, wait, Alex, please. But Alex? He just pressed call. The cops arrive. Within minutes, the same officers from before pulled up in their squad car. And when they saw the security footage, their expressions turned dead serious. Officer Daniels said, "You are under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, and destruction of property." Heather screeched, "This is unfair." The second officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Please turn around." And just like that, Heather was cuffed in her own front yard. Alex leaned against his fence, watching the absolute meltdown unfold. "You can't do this to me," Heather shrieked as they led her to the squad car. "I am the HOA president." Officer Daniels sighed. "You were removed from the board last week." Heather stiffened. She had forgotten about that little detail. Alex smirked. "Yes, you're just a regular neighbor now, huh?" Heather was seething. She tried one last desperate move. She turned to Alex, her eyes wild. You set me up." Alex tilted his head. "Oh no, Heather. You did that all on your own." And with that, Heather was shoved into the back of the police car. The door slammed shut, and just like that, Heather was gone. The aftermath. The next morning, Alex woke up to the best news of his life. Heather had been formally charged with trespassing, vandalism, filing false police reports, and the kicker, the HOA was being investigated for Heather's misuse of funds. Alex spent the morning reading hilarious texts from his neighbors. "Bro, we all saw her get arrested. It was beautiful. Did she really think she could get away with it? HOA finally feels normal without her." But the best part? Heather tried to sell her house, and no one wanted it. Why? Because everyone knew she was the neighborhood psycho. She had no choice. Heather moved out. And the neighborhood? It finally became peaceful. Alex threw one last pool party. No cops, no fake HOA violations, no Heather. And as he leaned back, drink in hand, watching the sun set over his perfect Heather-free neighborhood, he smiled. Because in the end, he won.